Welcome to Journey to Justice. I'm Eiko Kosasa, your host. Recently at the 2012 Kalaho'iho'i'ea, or Sovereignty Restoration Day event, I interviewed Dexter Keeaumoku Kaiama, a practicing attorney in Honolulu. As a legal strategy, Keeaumoku submits U.S. government documents into the U.S. courts to show the history of violations by the U.S. in occupying Hawaii. In this interview, he explains the importance of his work. I began the interview by asking him where he was born and raised.
I grew up here until I was 7, and then our family moved to Waimea on the Big Island, and I was raised in cattle country in Waimea. Graduated from high school over there, so that's where I grew up. So.
And then where did you go, because you're an attorney, so where did you go to university?
Well, my first year at college was at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, and then I completed my undergraduate study here at Manoa at the University of Hawaii. After graduating, I went to the University of Hawaii Law School, now named the William S. Richardson School of Law, and graduated with my law degree in 1986.
86.
Yes.
Can you share how did you come to political consciousness?
Okay. Now, I see that question and I have to answer it this way. There's two ways of having political consciousness. I had a political consciousness of certain politics, and I'm talking about within the U.S. framework for some time as an adult. Now, how I came to Hawaiian political consciousness, which is important for me, was because of my wife, and that's Manu Kaiama. She had always been and always had a sense of the Hawaiian political consciousness. I did not. But it was because of her, and because of her providing me education and eventually taking me to Kahoolawe. I consider her, as well as my trip to Kahoolawe, as my birthing of my Hawaiian political consciousness.
Wow.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit more about what happened, or?
Well, you know, and I'll put it this way. Again, my wife was always involved, and always, she had good knowledge about it. She was always maka'ala, and I was somewhat not involved. So I felt, how can I say, because I didn't have enough information or knowledge, I felt like I shouldn't participate. Because if I didn't know, I shouldn't go, essentially. But it was after, and with her constant prodding and giving me information, and after Kahoolawe, I kind of had a different view on things, which is, as a Hawaiian, I should go, even if I don't necessarily know. Because along the way, I'll pick up information, and there are many who do know that can guide me and help me along the way. So it was Kahoolawe that gave me that thought that just go, just do it. Become involved. Along the way, you'll learn, you'll be guided, you'll gain that mana'o and that ike, and you can continue to holomua, move forward.
Wow, so it was an experience at Kahoolawe, yeah?
Well, again, for me, it originates from my wife.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, so I know you're involved in, you were putting forth a lawsuit against the U.S. government. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that, or?
I can talk about that briefly.
Okay.
Yes. Now, and it's not a lawsuit against the U.S. government per se, but what I've been in, let's say within the last year or so, I've been involved with raising the political question, raising the legal question. It's important to understand that. Raising the legal question of the continuity of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Okay.
I have been providing the courts in the context of lawsuits brought primarily by banks against homeowners in the circuit courts of the state of Hawaii, trying to kick people out of their homes.
Right.
And I've been questioning the jurisdiction of these courts to actually whether they have the power to make decisions over matters concerning land. And land that was part of the Kingdom of Hawaii.
Right, right.
So what I've been doing is I've been providing the courts with the legal and factual basis for concluding that the Kingdom of Hawaii continues to exist. There's an important case in the state of Hawaii called State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo. In that case, Mr. Lorenzo, I think he was cited for a traffic ticket. And he went in before the courts and he said, "You don't have jurisdiction over me because I'm a Hawaiian national." He lost his case. But in losing his case, the appellate courts in Hawaii said, the reason Mr. Lorenzo lost his case, because at that time, he did not provide the courts with the factual or legal basis for concluding that the Kingdom of Hawaii continues to exist. So based on their own case, State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo, last year we've been providing the courts with that evidence that the Kingdom of Hawaii continues to exist. That evidence primarily being the executive agreements between Queen Liliuokalani and President Grover Cleveland. Those executive agreements, which are under international law, a binding compact, which obligates the office of the president to restore the Kingdom of Hawaii.
So how are you giving this information to the courts then?
What I'm doing in those cases that our clients are retaining me to raise that question, I'm filing what's called motions to dismiss the bank's complaint. And it's a motion to dismiss the complaint, so I've been filing legal documents saying, you court don't have subject matter jurisdiction over this complaint because it concerns matters, which is land, that properly belongs to the jurisdiction of the Kingdom of Hawaii. And because you as the state court don't have subject matter jurisdiction over land, you have to dismiss the plaintiff's complaint. So what we're saying is that the plaintiff is filing their complaint in the wrong court. If they have a dispute with the homeowner over matters concerning land, that complaint should be properly brought before a Kingdom of Hawaii court.
So, but what has happened in the court system when you do bring that forward?
What we've been doing, and it's a process, and what I've been doing primarily, now, I just have to put it in context. I've been working with Dr. Keeaumoku, and I've been utilizing his works as the basis for my argument. And when we presented the executive agreements are also partly a result of his work and his research. Now, these executive agreements are legal government documents. And it's government documents that's been held by the U.S. Congress, or the U.S. has held these documents for quite some time. They've recently become uncovered. And these documents, again, are international agreements which binds the United States to restore the Kingdom of Hawaii. We've now been presenting these documents as evidence to the courts, asking the courts to take judicial notice. And real quickly, judicial notice means we're asking the courts to accept these documents as true. Now, on many occasions, I've gotten the courts to take judicial notice of these executive documents. Then we come back and say, now that you've taken judicial notice of these documents, you've accepted the executive agreements as true, and no one has provided any opposition or any evidence whatsoever to dispute what we're saying. We've now met our burden of providing the factual and legal basis that the Kingdom of Hawaii continues to exist. And under State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo, these judges are obligated to dismiss the complaint because they have no subject matter jurisdiction. Now, as I've been engaging the courts, more and more the courts have been engaging me, asking me questions. And a judge has more recently acknowledged that. He basically said, Mr. Kaiama, if I accept your argument as true, then I don't exist. He says, you're asking me to ignite a political bomb, an atomic bomb on these courts. And my response to the judge was, Judge, I understand the court's contemplation of the consequences of its ruling, but speculation about that is beyond your authority. The law requires you, since you've acknowledged the executive agreements, the law now requires you to dismiss the complaint for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. Now, the political fallout of that, maybe that's what he's contemplating, but again, that's outside the bounds of his legal authority. So up to now, I haven't had a circuit court agree with me on those arguments. Not yet. But that's part of my process of bringing that information to the courts. Because I believe, myself and Dr. Sai and our clients, we're also educating the courts.
Can you back up a little bit and talk about the executive agreement between Lilu and Cleveland, just so that our audience, when they're listening to this interview, they'll have a bigger framework?
Sure. Okay. Now, and I think you know, after the illegal occupation, and we have the historical documents where the Queen protested the illegal occupation and assigned her authority as executive temporarily to the United States, not to the provisional government. And the language is clear. She set forth in her protest that she assigns it until such time as the United States can conduct its investigation and undo the wrong that it did. Now, we know the historical documents are true, that they had the Blount report. They did the internal investigation, and as part of the internal investigation, they determined that, of course, the Kingdom of Hawaii was illegally occupied with the assistance of the U.S. government. Now, At the same time, negotiations in the forms of diplomatic notes, they were being exchanged between Lili'u and Grover Cleveland. And as part of that exchange, the first part was Lili'u assignment of her executive power and what that meant. And in that Lili'u Kalani assignment, that's where they talk about the investigation, the findings of that investigation, the president's sincere regret, President Grover Cleveland's sincere regret that they participated in this illegal occupation and that they would do everything they could to endeavor to undo the wrong. That's the assignment. The agreement of restoration, again, which is a separate exchange of diplomatic notes, essentially called for the terms of that restoration. And the terms of the restoration is the president said, we would restore your kingdom, the Kingdom of Hawaii, to the state it was prior to the occupation. In return, Queen, you need to ensure us that once restored, you would grant amnesty to those that participated in the occupation, basically the illegal revolt. Initially, Lili'u refused that condition of the restoration because under her own penal code, treason was punishable by death. And because of the grave injustices, at that time Lili'u was not willing to waive or to pardon those treasoners and basically give them a pass from Hawaii's own law. The response by the U.S. government was continue to negotiate with the Queen. Finally, the Queen, upon further reflection, said, it's more important that I think of myself and my country than just myself. And so she agreed to the terms, saying that once restored, I would then pardon those who committed treason against me and grant them amnesty. That acceptance under the terms is what formed the executive agreement. The president said, I will restore you under these conditions. That being the only condition, once she accepted those conditions, the executive agreement was formed. So those, and there is an exchange of those diplomatic notes. So those are what we refer to as the executive agreements. Again, those documents have existed and have been part of the congressional records for the longest time, since 1898. Excuse me, it might have been 1893 and 1894, forgive me. Recently, we've become more aware of these executive agreements, and that's what I've been doing, presenting these documents to the courts.
And executive agreements, well, with the United States, it's like a treaty, right?
Yes,
so it
precisely.
Has that,
precisely. Under U.S. Constitution, executive agreements have the same force and effect as a treaty. And and a treaty and an international executive agreements are agreements between countries. And they have their terms. It's a contract between two separate independent countries, and they have their terms of the agreement. Once that agreement has been formed, that agreement under U.S. constitutional law is the supreme law of the land. So that, and even and I cited to the courts U.S. Supreme Court decisions, which affirms that and says executive agreements are the supreme law of the land, and any state statute or any kind of internal policy or law that conflicts with the executive agreement are invalid and null and void. So in moving to these motions to dismiss, I've been informing the court that these banks that brought the motions or brought this complaint for matters concerning land have said the courts have jurisdiction pursuant to a state of Hawaii statute. And they cite the statutes for foreclosure, for eviction, and that's the statutes that they rely on. Those statutes are in complete variance and in contradiction to the executive agreements, which call for the restoration of the kingdom. Therefore, under U.S. law, these state statutes are null and void because they're contrary to the executive agreements. And
so your strategy is to present them in the courts through this way as a strategy among many.
That's the legal argument. We're presenting the legal arguments, and we're presenting the facts and the evidence to the courts. We've presented a clear legal argument. I think the courts and many of the judges have acknowledged that the argument is persuasive, but at this point they understand the political consequences of their decision, so they're not willing to make that decision. So I have a couple of cases before the Hawaii appellate courts that basically say these judges, when they ruled against me or ruled against the motion, they committed reversible error. Now I'm taking it to the appellate courts, that the same appellate court that decided State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo, and saying this is your own law, this is your own case law. If you follow your own case law and you see the burden that we've met, you have no other option but to rule that we were correct, and order the district court, remand it back down and order the district court to say, you know what, we're right, we don't have subject matter jurisdiction, we have to dismiss the complaint. So now, we also understand that it's part of the process. I understand the possibility, because of the political consequences, that the appellate courts may try to find some way out of their own prior decisions. So it's just part of the process, because people have asked me, you know, these courts will never agree with what we're saying because of the implications of it, the profound implications. I said, you may be correct, but it's still important for me to say that I followed the process, that I gave them every opportunity to do the right thing, and their decisions show that they still haven't been able to do the right thing. So I can't just say or speculate that they're not going to do the right thing. I have to provide the process to show that, in fact, when given the opportunity, they again failed to do the right thing. So that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I just realized it's very what attorneys do, right? Because you want to leave like a paper trail, right? To show that. So my attorney, for instance, you got to put all the evidence in, whether they consider things or not, like in a court case, right?
Just as Lili'u did, she documented, right? And that's how she preserved her rights, by documenting it, by making the statement of protest. So that's what I'm trying to do at the same time.
Okay.
Now, I also believe, and I've had discussions with Keanu, that should the state courts fail in their legal obligation, then maybe this becomes a matter that has to be raised at the next level. And when I say, just for clarification, the next level, is that something we need to raise with the international community. So once we complete this process, then maybe we need to consider what the next steps are.
So I know you wanted to talk about, was it the Native
Road Commission?
So.
And that's what, today we're at La Ho'iho'ia, and one of the discussion panels was the Native Road Commission. And the Native Road Commission, of course, is part of the enactment, State Enactment 195. And that's where a commission has been formed. Commissioners have been selected for purposes of creating a list of people to participate in the formation of a Native Hawaiian governing entity. Okay. Now, my concern and what I thought was important is, I believe it's important that each of these people who decide to participate in the Road Commission understand what the legal implications of that might be. The Road Commission, how can I say, the language that they use in their Road Commission is the protection of inherent sovereignty and indigenous rights. And while the protection of inherent sovereignty and indigenous rights are important, I look at it as an attorney, what are the legal consequences of using those terms? And I wanted people to understand that the legal consequences of those terms may not be what they think they are. So I want to make sure that when they sign that paper, or if they decide to go with the Road Commission on that va'a, that their actions, that they at some point may need to be accountable for their actions. Now, the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to take just kind of an extremist position. So when I was asked and I had the opportunity, the first thing I presented to the panel and the people listening was this. Okay. Now what this is, real quickly, is Chapter 6 of the Hawaiian Penal Code. Now the Hawaiian Kingdom Penal Code. Now this was the penal code that existed prior to the occupation of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Chapter 6. Now what this is the statute for treason. And of course, treason is defined to be any plotting or attempt to dethrone or destroy the king, as well as, or the adhering to the enemies thereof, giving them aid and comfort, the same being done by a person owing allegiance to this kingdom. Now, of course, the punishment for treason under Hawaiian Kingdom law is death. Now, I wanted them to just grasp that and just think about whether their participation in the Native Road Commission could be considered or could be argued at some point to be treason to the Hawaiian Kingdom. Just something for them to think about. The reason is again, the Royal Commission and the formation of the Native Hawaiian governing entity is under a state act, Act 195. I also wanted them to understand the United States has already taken a position as to what inherent sovereignty and indigenous rights mean. And the next board that I presented to the panel and the audience was just some information that I obtained, one from Dr. Keeaumoku, also from the U.S. National Security Council position on indigenous people, and finally, also from AquataIndianNation.com, an article they produced on inherent sovereignty, and finally, the American Society of International Law, an article they produced. Now, just as a quick summary, all of these authorities have come to the conclusion that inherent sovereignty and indigenous rights does not include a right of independence or permanent sovereignty. They also have defined indigenous rights defined indigenous people as having a right of internal self-determination, and by virtue of that right may negotiate their political status within the framework of the existing nation state. And finally, again, as with the American Law Society, again says the same thing. Essentially the point being that the Native Royal Commission has been confined or restrained in their approach. And I don't believe the Native Royal Commission can ever lead to independence.
Right.
It can only lead to, their path has already been determined by U.S. determination of inherent sovereignty and indigenous rights. And that is one of a nation within a nation, similar to an American tribe.
Yeah.
So if you believe the Kingdom of Hawaii continues to exist, then possibly is your participation in a governing entity that only can achieve nation within a nation status. Is that grounds for, is that the commission of an act of treason against the Hawaiian Kingdom? Something to think about. It's an extremist position, but it is something, once the Kingdom of Hawaii is restored, that is something that may be asked. They maybe say, that, what was your conduct prior to the restoration of the kingdom? What acts did you take or not take to either assist in the restoration or the further delay in the restoration of the Kingdom of Hawaii?
That's a good point.
And the last board, and that's not really necessary, I actually provided part of the executive agreement, which was the Lili'o Kalani assignment. And it's there again in the language where the delegate or the representative for the president acknowledged the president's sincere regret for the U.S.'s involvement in the illegal occupation and his promise to undo the injustice. So that was essentially my mana'o and my ike for the people who were participating in the road.
And what did they say today?
Well, again now, our audience is already set by what this event is.
Yeah, they
Laho'i
already
Ho'ia,
know.
which is a Hawaiian Independence Day.
Right.
So most of the people attending today's event already are pro-independence.
Right.
Most of them, or have an empathy for independence.
Right.
So they understood, and I think it wasn't something that necessarily needed to be explained much. But the message that I wanted to present it to was those who may not have, who may be visiting for the first time.
Oh yeah.
And who may not be part of this ongoing movement,
Yeah.
and who hasn't been participating in restoration of the kingdom or some form of independence.
Yeah.
I wanted them to make them think about, should I participate in the Royal Commission?
Yeah.
And what am I doing if I do participate? I want you to make your decision based on the information that you have. I don't want you to participate just because some chosen official who happens to be chosen and have a designated status tells you to sign it, and that's the basis for you to sign it.
Right.
My thought is I don't want them to lead you down the wrong path either.
Right.
So.
Have you gone out to other people, just not a like a gathering like this, but people who may not know.
What's interesting, about 2 months ago, around there, they had an initial Royal Commission meeting.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know that who the audience was, but as I later understood it, it was really an invitation to the Royal Societies. So it was a presentation of the Royal Commission to the Royal Societies. You know, the Royal Order, Kahoolawe Society, and their leadership. And I'm speculating, but of course, I think what they're doing, of course, is try to garner the support of the Royal Societies,
Right.
because that's part of their whole selling point. If we can have the Royal Societies on board, it'll make it easier for them. Because if the Royal Societies endorse the Royal Commission, there are many who don't necessarily are involved much in the politics who say, the Royal Society is on board, so I'm going to sign, without making their own independent decision.
Right.
So at the Royal Commission, that initial meeting, I did appear, my wife and I, and then when they opened it up for comment, a number of people commented, and then I, third or fourth in line, I informed the Royal Societies of the existence of the executive agreements. I informed the Royal Societies of the international obligation under those executive agreements, calling for the restoration of the Kingdom of Hawaii. So I said, these are documents that exist. This is a binding legal obligation. So I want you as leaders of the Royal Society to understand that there is a legal right to restore the kingdom. And as leaders of the Royal Society, you will be making recommendation to the membership as to where we should go. So now that you know, you also have a kuleana. And that kuleana is, if you support, as a Royal Society member, I believe it's important that that discussion include the restoration of the kingdom.
Right.
And perhaps include the discussion that we cannot participate in the Royal Commission because that is in conflict with the restoration of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And it's kind of funny because shortly after making the statement, that was pretty much the end of the presentation at that point, because I said, okay, let's have lunch.
Because we want to get into this.
Well, because and Governor Waihee also agreed that he couldn't dispute the legal the legal arguments that we were making.
Yeah.
He was more, of course, his position was, you have the legal right, but you have to also understand the political might.
Yeah.
And right now, our people don't have the political might. So that's why we need to consider the Royal Commission as a way of gaining some of our political might. Now, my response to that was, it's our legal right that forms our political might.
Yeah.
So we cannot deviate from our legal right. We need to support, and we need to actually gather around that legal right and start to enforce that as our political might as well.
Yeah.
So we can't decide yet that we've lost the fight, because we need to take the fight to the people. So that was my position.
That is kind of what they're saying, isn't it? You lost the fight, so might as well do this. This is the best we can do.
And it's gone back to, that's an argument that has been made by many of the supporters of the Akaka bill and other supporters, and I haven't bought that argument. You know, it's I believe two things. One, we have political might, we just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And that we're not willing to exercise it.
Yeah.
The other reason is, I think there's been a good job of those who support the Akaka bill and those who support the nation to within nation concept of, they've done a much better job of advertising themselves, of promoting themselves.
Yeah, they have more money.
They have more
it's
money.
tied to the state.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's tied to the OHA, it's tied to the state.
Yeah.
They've had every opportunity to promote that message. And along with that message, they've also promoted an idea of fear that we would lose certain rights and certain entitlements if we don't get on board. Better to have something than nothing. And my message has been, at what price do we get something? And for me, the price has always been too much to accept that little something and in return give up all our other rights. I, for one, cannot give up our rights to independence just for myself in order to gain some small benefit. That was always ours to begin with.
Yeah.
That was always ours to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I'm one of the few out there, but I believe it's a correct position.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it is why I think so. Why would you go for something in the United States and just, to me, as a political scientist, structurally, they can't give you, the state of Hawaii can't give you independence, right? They just can't do that.
That's right.
It's doesn't work that way, and
But they can move you as a people
yeah,
to give it up yourself.
Yeah, then they don't.
And that's what I'm concerned about, is all of these movements, that being the Akaka Bill, that being now the Native Road Commission, is an effort by the United States,
Yeah.
to get us as a people to relinquish that right.
Yeah.
And many of us don't understand. I don't know. Maybe we don't know or we don't understand that that's what we're doing by participating in these, in the Akaka Bill and the Native Road Commission. So
I think you're right. I think if they know, people know what's at stake in that way, obviously they won't go for it. But the difficulty is, like we're saying, there's so much money put in the other way, and it's said in a language in which America is always talking to everybody, be afraid of this, do this, be afraid. That's how America runs, right? You're afraid of everything. This is why you do anything, right? So it just fits, to me, it just fits together.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and as
scary.
a political scientist, we already have, I think, compromised our position and hurt our position if we are operating from a basis of fear.
Yeah.
You know, and we can't. Now, I understand they have the military might.
Yeah.
And I understand there's always the possibility that they may exercise that military might or other kinds of might to take matters from us. Now, all I would do is, of course, stand up and shout that they're continuing to violate international law.
Yeah.
But for me, I would much rather they take it than I give it to them. Not much rather, but I'm not going to give it to them.
Yeah.
I'm not. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. You know?
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to, I mean, many of us, including yourself, we're trying to get more of our lahui to say the same thing. We're not giving it to you.
Yeah.
It's ours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have every legal right, and you don't have any legal right to continue to exercise that jurisdiction, that occupation you have over us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to add anything more to the interview that you feel you haven't said that you want to say?
I hope that I made sense so some people can think about what I said and what we're doing. And I really would like to see if I could persuade them to say, hey, what he's doing, what you're doing, and what some of the people here at Loho'i Ho'i'ea are doing is the correct position.
Yeah.
And we need to jump on board on that. And we
Yeah.
need to go out to the communities and say, Road Commission, we love you as people, but we think what you're doing runs contrary to our rights as an independent nation.
Yeah.
And so we cannot participate.
Yeah.
And those who support the Akaka Bill, same thing. You know, either you are our family and people we love, or maybe you're not. Maybe you are an enemy of the nation. But because we support the independence and the restoration of the Kingdom of Hawaii, we cannot support those efforts that you're trying to.
That's kind of the hardest part is what you're just saying, because when you know people, and then how do you got to separate it, like you're saying, okay, you know, you're going to do this, we love you, but we think what you're doing is not the right thing to do, or you misunderstand what's at stake.
Yeah. You know, my feeling is if it's someone you respect, then I don't understand why you can't raise those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very Hawaiian for you to tell a loved one or a family member you're wrong and why you're wrong.
Yeah.
And tell them, you know, so in my mind, if you're someone I respect or someone I love, it's my kuleana to tell you you're wrong if I believe you're wrong and why you're wrong.
Yeah.
Then of course, if you think I'm wrong, I think I would much rather have you tell me to my face, Keeaumoku, you're wrong, and this is why.
Yeah.
So something I can consider and think about.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know that I have all the answers. I don't know that I'm right about everything.
Yeah.
So if it's someone I respect or love, I would hope they would tell me, hey, you're missing this point. You know, or you're missing that point.
Right.
And your argument fails because of this. And I'll go, oh, good point. Or I can say, sorry, uncle, or sorry, auntie, but you're wrong because of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so, you know, it's interesting because over the years I've become less inhibited about being in front of people I respect, whether it's individually or in front of a large audience, to say, hey, kalamai, but you're wrong. And this is
Yeah.
why you're wrong. Now, I don't need to shout it.
Yeah.
I don't need to be threatening because I don't mean to be. I don't want to be because
Yeah.
I believe my position is supported in sound legal argument and
Yeah.
a reasonable basis.
Yeah.
So there's no, I don't come in front of you or in front of anyone I speak with any sense of arrogance, with any animosity. It's saying, I believe this is the truth. Here it is.
Yeah.
And once you understand the truth, I'm hoping that you agree with me and move with me in that direction.
Yeah.